So India tops 200,000 COVID deaths. Hospitals and cremation sites are being overwhelmed. So India is having a lot of problems right now. Now, here's what's interesting. Uh, they are also making 60% of the world's vaccines, yet they don't have them for their own country. Here's something from PBS. COVID is out of control in India, where most vaccines are made. How did that happen? The coronavirus thrives when humans let their guards down. Following months of relaxed restrictions on face masks and social distancing, and amid emerging COVID-19 variants, India is suffering a record-breaking surge of new infections that has sickened millions of people, threatening the world's largest democracy. These are PBS's words, with a fractured healthcare system and harrowing death toll. So they're making all these vaccines. They're not staying in the country. So then they don't have enough resources for their own country. And then the United States, recently the United States passed something here. It's in this article somewhere. But the United States passed something. Okay, here we go. So in February, President Joe Biden signed the Defense Production Act to boost U.S. COVID-19 vaccine production. Now, here's the kicker. That decision cut off exports of raw materials, such as vials and stoppers, to India. So basically, because of the worldwide almighty altar of capitalism, for us to do this act, that meant that, oh, well, now we're not exporting stuff because heaven forbid we just invest in actual services and we just invest in, making what we need. Which, again, Richard Wolff pointed this out at the start of the pandemic. The United States was one of the only countries, one of the only developed countries at least, that during this whole thing, 1 million less people were working in social services. 1 million less during a pandemic when you need it more than ever. That bleeds into all this because now it's like, well, instead of actually preparing, instead of upping production of everything we needed and addressing this head on and funding what needed to be funding, we just gave a bunch of money to the banks. So now instead, we have to do stuff like this where it's like you're basically rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. Like, okay, well, we're going to do more stuff here. Well, that means that materials aren't going to India, where they're already producing 60% of the world's vaccines. It's not staying in the country at all because it's going to other places. And it's so here we are.
Which goes completely against what Modi's big philosophy was, because the BJP ran him as a right-wing populist, and that's why he
Which
won.
is an oxymoron, by the way.
Right,
There's no such thing as
totally.
a right-wing populist.
Yeah.
It's anyway.
They claim that he was a man of the people, but they kind of ran him as this pro-India, pro-nationalist candidate that he was going to come and help. He was going to come and help Indians out of poverty, right? Like he was going to help them climb up the caste just like he did, because he started as a tea vendor and worked his way up to politics, where he became the governor of a state, and then he's now the prime minister. But it goes against because his whole big plan was make in India, which is we're going to produce products in India for India. We're going to, have jobs here, very similar to what Trump was saying. We're going to bring manufacturing back to America so that Americans can have jobs and we can all celebrate the fruits of our labor and all that kind of shit. But
were his promises just as bogus?
It seems that way. I mean, at first, from talking to a family in India and a few people that I met there when I was there in 2019, a lot of people very much had hopes that he was going to do something better for them. Like he basically realized that neoliberal healthcare policies aren't going to work for a country like India. So he made a pseudo version of healthcare for all so that poor people can have healthcare. He wanted to get internet to everybody. But again, you're seeing the fact that anybody that criticizes what's going on in India, regardless of the fact that he wants to get internet to everybody, he's using the internet to censor people. Like,
yeah,
you're not allowed to talk about this on Twitter. Yeah, right. So the facade of what he was presented as in 2014 is kind of coming apart, and there a lot of people saw this coming, and I had my complaints about what he did, but I also thought there were some things that he was trying to do where I was like, okay, let's see what happens. This seems like a really interesting idea. Let's hope it works out. But again, being that he's part of a right-wing capitalist government, it falls apart anyway. There is capitalism doesn't really think about people, and it doesn't actually have a plan. Like they don't look ahead to figure things out. It's just sort of everything is built in the short term, right? Like we gave $6 trillion to the bank, to the banks as like a short-term plan, but the long-term plan was how are we going to help people? And there was no long-term plan to help people. There was just more short-term plans to bail out the banks and
Right.
other corporations. And India's doing the same thing. Like the farmer strikes that were happening, and to my knowledge are continuing to happen, were against neoliberal economic policies.
Right.
And he basically squashed the strike very similarly to the way America squashes strikes, by using police violence. So it's
Mhm.
just and he's not thinking far ahead. He's thinking about what's good for India in the short term, which is let's have a bunch of corporations and private companies buy out the agriculture industry in India and quote help farmers make more money. Well, farmers saw right through that, right? And this thing is no different. If you're going to make 60% of the world's vaccines and you only have 1.4% of your population fully inoculated, something's wrong with that. The math just doesn't add up. You
Sure.
should be helping people out.
Well,
And realistically, oh, sorry.
no, 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 no. Finish.
I just wanted to say realistically, if America wants to tout itself as the greatest country in the world, and we make these huge statements about, oh, we're going to help people across the world. That's why we're battling terrorism. That's why we have to stop China. That's why we have to stop communism, because they're committing these egregious human rights violations. Then why aren't you trying to help India and Africa and these other countries that are struggling to get the vaccine and struggling to get people inoculated? Why wouldn't you use the Defense Production Act not just to help the people of this country, but also other countries that can't do it, and you're also trying to make business deals with? Like it just doesn't. None of this adds up, and we're kind of seeing the consequence of that with the massive spike. I think it's like 250% increase in COVID rates just this month in India, which is crazy.
So, and just a side note, based on what we were talking about, when I was saying stuff like right wing populism is not real, which by the way it isn't. If you're wondering what we're referring to, if maybe you've listened to the corporate media nonsense and maybe you've succumbed to the brainwashing, and in your mind you think that populism is racist or anything like that, please do yourself a favor and read "The People Know" by Thomas Frank. It will explain what populism is, the history of populism, the way populism has been demonized over the years to try to get people to go against their own interests. And it will squash all of those lies, which is what they are. They are lies. Populism is actually very socially progressive. In this country, the United States, one of the reasons women have the right to vote is because of populist movements. One of the reasons that there was a big labor movement at some point was because of populist
Yeah.
movements. So that's what populism actually is. There is no such thing as a right wing populist. It is by definition the opposite of being right wing. Anyway, so let's go to this, and then we're going to go to Andrew Cuomo. But so here's some more stuff. So on Sunday, this past Sunday, the Biden administration committed to sending India supplies. This includes therapeutics, oxygen to treat those already infected. And so here's what Biden tweeted: just as India sent assistance to the United States as our hospitals were strained early in the pandemic, we are determined to help India in its time of need. Now, on Monday of this week, the U.S. said it would share as many as 60 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine. The vaccine they're not using. That's a vaccine that we don't give out in the United States. So they're like,
Yeah.
hey, this vaccine that we're not giving out, we still have millions of doses of it. You can have it. Screw it. We're not using it. There
Yeah.
you go. It's so
Oh my god.
ridiculous. Uh, so what's going on over in India? And meanwhile, here in the United States, we are dangerously close to the point where supply is going to exceed demand, where there's more vaccines available than people who are taking them. So,
Yeah.
wow.
And
I mean,
New York State already faced that, and I know we're going to talk about Cuomo in a bit, but Cuomo put out a bill that basically said you have to throw it away. You
yes. Well,
can't
the
call
person
people.
got in trouble.
Hmm.
That guy got in, and I think and this is foggy in my brain, but there was that guy. He was going to have to throw away a bunch of vaccines, and he's like, "This is not right." So he got them to people,
Yeah,
and they fired him.
yeah.
And I think he has since gotten his job back because of all the public outcry about it. I think, but
But
holy shit, man!
smaller
Again,
pharmacies were in trouble in New York because they just had too many doses and not enough people were signing up. So they were like, well, there's a bunch of backlog people that aren't in, group 1A or whatever. Why don't we just give it to them? And instead of just letting them do that, they made them throw away a bunch of vaccines,
it's
which
so
is like
messed up.
it makes no sense.
No, it
Yes,
doesn't.
that's why I'm like, if you have more of the supply than the demand, then now would be the time to start sending over these doses to India and Africa and Latin America, because those are the countries that need it,
Hmm.
and
Or
it's
just
also
make it available to anyone.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, like, and I think now we're at the point where it's available to whoever wants it, but or I think it's over 18 or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's like if certain people, if you're past a certain group and you have extras, just make it available. And they were doing
yeah,
some things where people could get on a waiting list, like let's say you weren't in the group 1A or 1B, and it wasn't to your group yet. You could get on a waiting list, and at the end of the day, if they had any extras, they would call you, and you could like get down there and you could get the vaccine. But it's just something when you realize that we're in this as one world, and you witness firsthand capitalism ruining that,
yeah,
be it handling a pandemic, be it climate change, be it peace, whatever it is. I mean, capitalism just basically prohibits acting as one world.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, to people that were like on the fence of like or claim that there's compassionate capitalism and all that kind of crap, like you just have to
There's no
look at
such
the
thing.
way that
That's like a
there's no
right-wing
such thing. I know
populist.
exactly.
There's, the
Exactly.
right-wing populist had compassionate capitalism. No such thing as any of those things.
Yeah,
Those are all it's like saying,
the
yeah.
qualifiers they put, but you
It's
can't have
there's a right-wing populist the same way there is wet fire.
yeah. But you can't have compassionate capitalism when the option is to throw food away because it saves the corporations money than it is to just buy up the food and send it to communities that need them. Like that's capitalism. Capitalism would rather throw it away than actually feed people that need to be fed, that are are having a hard time buying groceries. Like it's just this is the system that we're living in, and a lot more people are waking up to it, which is great. I want more people to fight back and stop using qualifiers for a system that clearly doesn't give a shit, and there is no such thing as compassionate capitalism at all.
No,
Y-
there's no such thing as compassionate conservatism. There's no such thing as any of that stuff. It is by its very nature
Yeah,
completely like just doesn't take humanity into account.
yeah.
That's the point of it. That's why it does the same thing every time and it implodes. If capitalism was a car, it would break down every 2,000 miles. Would you keep that car? Like, or less than that, really.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and